I was closing a bleeder during emergency trauma surgery when my phone flashed an alert from my father's old office safe. My husband was on the camera, so was my mother-in-law. 3 days earlier, he told his family, Noelle isn't stable enough to run a hospital anymore. What he didn't know was that my dad's security system didn't just record failed safe codes, it backed up every clip, every access log, and every word to a protected server. By the next morning, my husband walked into a hospital meeting thinking he was about to take control of my father's legacy. He walked out past the same nurses he had tried to turn against me, with security on both sides of him. My name is Noelle Rains. I'm 34 and I'm a trauma surgeon in Ohio. My dad founded Rains Surgical and Trauma Center when I was 12. It wasn't some shiny billionaire hospital at the beginning. It was one leased floor, 2 ORs, bad vending machine coffee, and my dad sleeping in his office more nights than he slept at home. I basically grew up there. I did homework in waiting rooms, I ate cafeteria grilled cheese for dinner. I knew which nurses kept candy in their desks and which elevator made that awful scraping sound on the 3rd floor. So when my dad died 2 years ago, the hospital didn't feel like a business. It felt like the last piece of him I still had. My husband, Callum Pierce, was an anesthesiologist at the same hospital. We met during my first year as an attending. He was calm, steady, never loud. In trauma, that matters. When a room gets chaotic, the anesthesiologist is the person watching the numbers, the breathing, the blood pressure, the part everyone else can't lose track of. I thought that said something about who he was. His mother, Marjorie, used to work in hospital administration. She had this way of sounding kind while making you feel about 2 inches tall. She never said, I want control. She said things like, honey, patient safety comes first. Or, you're too tired to see how tired you are. Or, my personal favorite, this isn't punishment, this is protection. At first I tried to be fair. I was tired. Trauma surgery is not a soft life. I missed birthdays. I forgot laundry in the washer until it smelled weird. I once fell asleep in my car in the hospital parking garage and woke up with my phone stuck to my cheek. Callum used to say he loved how hard I worked. Then my dad's trust settled, and suddenly the same work ethic became concerning. And it started with small comments. Marjorie would come over with soup I didn't ask for, and look around my kitchen like she was checking whether I could live alone. You look thin. You're drinking too much coffee. Callum said you cried after that kid from the highway accident. I had cried. In a stairwell, for maybe 5 minutes. A 14-year-old had come in after being thrown from a truck bed, and we couldn't save him. I didn't know my husband was reporting that to his mother like it was evidence. When I asked him about it, he said, she worries. Don't make it a thing. That became his line for everything. When I asked why his mother had a key to our house, I was making it a thing. When I asked why I was still paying her condo HOA fees almost a year after she said she just needed help for a couple months, I was keeping score. When I asked why his brother was using my Costco account, Callum said, it's not like you can't afford it. It sounds small. I know it does. But that's how they did it. They made every individual thing sound too tiny to fight over, until my whole life had little pieces missing. The first time they embarrassed me in public was at Marjorie's birthday brunch. I had just finished a 26-hour shift. I still went because Callum said, please, just show your face. Mom already thinks you're pulling away. I brought a cake from a bakery near the hospital. Marjorie opened the box, smiled like she was disappointed on purpose, and said, store-bought? Well, you're busy. Callum's brother laughed. I let it go. Then, while everyone was still drinking coffee, Marjorie tapped a folder on the table. Noelle, before you run back to work, we need to discuss your temporary leave plan. I looked at Callum. He wouldn't look back. Inside the folder was a draft letter to the hospital's medical executive committee. It said I would voluntarily step back from administrative control while a transition team handled operations. The transition team was Callum and Marjorie. I read it twice because my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. You drafted this? I asked. Callum sighed. Not guilty. Annoyed. We drafted options. At your mother's birthday brunch? Marjorie leaned forward and put on that soft voice. Honey, you're exhausted. You're emotional. This isn't about money. I said, then why does this give you access to the hospital my father left me? Callum's brother muttered, here we go. I looked at him. Excuse me? He raised his hands. I'm just saying you always make yourself the victim. Marjorie watched my hands. I hate that I noticed it. My fingers were shaking a little because I was furious and sleep-deprived and cornered at a table full of people acting like I was embarrassing them by not handing over my life. Marjorie looked down at my hand and said, very quietly, see? That was the moment I stopped arguing. Not because I was calm, because I finally understood that if I got loud, they would use it. I pushed the folder back. I'm not signing this. Callum followed me into the hallway near the bathroom. You made that so much harder than it had to be, he said. I just stared at him. You brought paperwork to your mom's birthday brunch. It's not paperwork, it's a plan. It's a plan to remove me. His face changed for half a second. Then he did the soft husband voice. Babe, the board is already nervous. I said, why would the board be nervous? He looked away. That was the first real crack. 2 days later, one of our charge nurses, Pilar, stopped me near the trauma bay. Pilar had been at the hospital longer than I had. She knew everyone's coffee order, everyone's tells, everyone's fake smile. She said, can I ask you something weird? With this place? Always. She didn't laugh. Did you know a woman named Mrs. Pierce called the nurses' station asking whether your hands shake during procedures? I felt like the floor shifted half an inch. What did you say? And I said your hands are steadier than my rent payment. I almost smiled. Then she added, she said she was helping with a wellness review. I went to my office after that and started checking things I should have checked weeks earlier. My hospital email had a forwarding rule I didn't create. It wasn't sending everything, just messages with words like trust, credentialing, leave, impairment, board, and executive committee. The forwarding address had Callum's initials in it. My calendar had been shared with Marjorie's old admin email, and my office access logs showed Callum's badge had opened my office twice after midnight on nights I was in surgery. I sat there looking at the screen, feeling stupid. Not because I should have known everything, because some part of me had helped them. After my dad died, I gave Callum passwords because I couldn't handle all the calls. I let Marjorie organize paperwork because she said administrators were better with forms. I let them help because I was grieving and tired and married. I called my dad's attorney, Raya Iqbal, from my car in the hospital garage. She listened while I talked way too fast. Then she said, don't confront them yet. I said, that's your advice? That's my advice if you want proof instead of a screaming match. I hated that she was right. She asked me to send her the forwarding rule, the calendar access, the badge logs, the brunch folder, and any messages about my mental state. Then she said, where are the original trust documents? My dad's office safe, at my house. Change the code. I did after he died. Change it again. So I did. That night, Callum stood in the doorway of my dad's office while I reset the safe. My dad's old white coat still hung behind the door. I kept telling myself I'd move it eventually. I never did. Callum said, what are you doing? Changing the code? Why? Because it's my safe. He gave this tired little laugh. That's unnecessary. No, your mother pretending to run a wellness review on me was unnecessary. He went quiet. Then he said, she used the wrong wording. Did you give her access to my calendar? No. Too fast. I wanted to believe him. That's the embarrassing part. Even with the evidence sitting in my inbox, I still wanted my husband to be better than what I was seeing. So I tested him. I said, send me everything you and your mom have written about me stepping back. If this is concern, I should be allowed to read it. He rubbed his jaw. You're not in the right headspace for that. There it was. Not there's nothing. Not of course. Just a refusal wrapped in concern. The next morning, I removed Marjorie from my calendar, changed my passwords, turned on two-factor authentication, and sent everything to Ria. I also stopped the automatic payment for Marjorie's condo, HOA. She texted 12 minutes later. Your bank made a mistake. I wrote back, no mistake, I'm not paying it anymore. She called. I didn't answer. Then she texted, this isn't like you. Callum is right. You're spiraling. I screenshotted it. That night, the Pierce family group chat lit up. Callum's brother wrote, Mom is crying because Noelle cut off her condo fees with no warning. And Marjorie wrote, I don't care about money. I care about my daughter-in-law's health. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, I paid those fees for 11 months. I'm done. Callum replied in the group chat, Noelle, this isn't the place. Apparently brunch was the place to pressure me into signing away control of a hospital. But the group chat wasn't the place for me to say I was done paying his mother's bills. 3 nights later, the trauma call came in. 2-car crash. 1 patient unstable. Internal bleeding. We moved fast. Trauma bay to OR. By the time I scrubbed in, I had blood drying on my shoe and a resident reading labs behind me. My personal phone was in a clear bag at the nurse's station because I was waiting for Ria to send me something about the trust. Pilar was circulating. About 10 minutes in, she looked at my phone. Then she looked at me. I knew that face. What? I asked. She held the screen where I could see it. Office safe alert, then another. Incorrect code attempt. Then a still image appeared. Callum was in my father's office. Marjorie was behind him in her camel coat holding a folder. A man I didn't recognize stood near the desk wearing gloves. For 1 second, everything in the OR sounded too loud. The monitor, The suction. Someone asking for more lap pads. Pilar said quietly, "What do you want me to do?" I looked back at the patient. That's the thing. You don't get to fall apart in the OR. You don't get to run home because your marriage is catching fire. There was a man open on my table who had nothing to do with my husband. So I said, "Call security. Tell them Rain's protocol, preserve evidence, don't let anyone leave with documents." Then I went back to the patient. I was furious, shaking under the gloves, furious. But my hands worked. Later, I found out what happened in the office. My dad had installed that security system after a billing employee stole patient records years before. He was paranoid about documents. I used to tease him for it. That night, I was grateful. The system didn't lock them in like some movie. It locked the safe drawer, backed up the camera feed, logged the failed code attempts, and sent a silent alert to hospital security and Ria's firm. Security got there while they were still arguing in the office. The camera caught enough before that. Callum said, "The code should have worked." The man with gloves said, "You told me she wouldn't change it." Marjorie snapped, "She's in surgery, we have time." Then Callum said the line I still can't get past. "She'll look paranoid if she fights this. That's the whole point." I didn't hear that until after the surgery. We saved the patient. He was still critical, but alive when I stepped out. I washed my hands twice, maybe 3 times. I don't remember. Pilar handed me my phone and a paper cup of coffee. She didn't ask if I was okay. She just said, "Ria is here, conference room B." Of course it was conference room B, the room with the broken projector and the thermostat that only worked when it felt like it. I changed scrubs, tied back my wet hair, and walked in. Callum was already there. So was Marjorie. So were Ria, the hospital's security director, our chief medical officer, 2 board members, and the hospital's outside counsel. The man with gloves sat at the far end of the table, looking like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. Callum stood when I came in. "Noelle," he said, using that soft public voice. "You need to sit down." I did sit. Not because he told me to, because I wasn't giving him a performance. Marjorie put her hand on her chest. "Honey, this has gotten out of control." I said, "You were in my father's office after 2 in the morning. Callum cut in. "We were trying to locate documents because you've been acting irrationally." Ria slid a folder across the table. "Before anyone makes more accusations, we're going to review access records." Callum leaned back like this was annoying paperwork. At first it wasn't dramatic. That made it worse somehow. Ria showed the email forwarding rule, then the calendar sharing, then the badge logs, then Pilar's written statement about Marjorie calling the nurses' station, asking about my hands. One board member, Dr. Harlan, looked uncomfortable. He had known my dad for years, but even he didn't jump to defend me. That stung. Callum kept his voice calm. "You're taking normal concern and making it look sinister." Ria clicked to the next file. It was a draft petition. Not filed yet, but prepared. It described me as emotionally volatile, sleep-deprived, financially impulsive, and possibly impaired in executive decision-making. Under temporary spouse representative, it listed Callum Pierce. Under administrative advisor, it listed Marjorie Pierce. I looked at him. "You were going to file this?" Callum said. "I was trying to protect the hospital. The hospital had its strongest trauma quarter in 5 years." "You're not the hospital, Noelle." That one hit harder than I wanted it to. My dad used to say the opposite. Not as pressure, as love. He'd say, "This place has your fingerprints all over it." Ria played the video last. Callum at the safe, Marjorie beside him, the man in gloves trying the code, then the audio. "She'll look paranoid if she fights this." That's the whole point. Nobody said anything for a few seconds. Even Callum stopped performing. Then Marjorie said, "That was taken out of context." Pilar would have laughed if she'd been in the room. I know she would have. The outside counsel closed his folder. "Dr. Pierce, effective immediately, your administrative access is suspended pending investigation. Your clinical privileges are under review until the medical executive committee completes its process." Callum stared at him. "You can't do that," the counsel said. "We can restrict access while there's an active security matter." Marjorie stood so fast her chair knocked the wall. "I'm his mother. I have every right to be here," the security director said. "You're not an employee, contractor, authorized visitor, or patient in this matter. You need to leave." Callum looked at me then. Not sorry, angry. "You're really going to do this to me?" I looked at his white coat, his badge, the man I had trusted beside me in operating rooms. The man who had watched me grieve my father and decided grief made me easier to corner. I said, "No, you did this while I was saving a patient." Security didn't drag him. There were no handcuffs, no big scene. That almost made it more humiliating. 2 officers stood by the door while Callum gathered his phone and his folder. Then they walked him down the hallway, past the nurses' station, past the residence, past Pilar standing by the trauma board with her arms crossed. He kept his head up until the elevator opened. Marjorie followed behind him, whispering something I couldn't hear. For once, she didn't look concerned. She looked furious that concern hadn't worked. The consequences were not instant and clean. Callum wasn't arrested that night. A police report was filed for documentation. The hospital opened an investigation. His access stayed suspended while they reviewed the badge logs, the draft petition, the email forwarding, and the safe footage. The man with gloves turned out to be a private investigator Marjorie had found through an old hospital contact. He claimed he thought he was helping retrieve marital documents. Sure, Marjorie was banned from non-patient access to the hospital. I stopped paying her HOA fees for good. She sent one last text from a new number. "You destroyed my son because you couldn't accept help." I wrote back, "Do not contact me again." Then I blocked her. I filed for divorce 2 weeks later. Callum tried to rewrite it after that. He sent emails about our vows. He said he was scared for me. He said his mother pushed too hard. He said he never wanted control, only stability. But Ria found the texts between them on our shared home computer. Marjorie had written, "If she signs voluntarily, it's cleaner." Callum had replied, "If she doesn't, we make the board nervous." That was enough. Not enough to magically make the divorce easy. Nothing about divorce is easy when the person knows exactly where you're soft. But it was enough for me to stop wondering if I had misunderstood him. I still control my father's trust. The hospital didn't magically become peaceful overnight, but they didn't take it from me. I also added 2 independent board members and tightened access rules. Not because I'm weak, because I'm done letting love be used as a security gap. Pilar got into a nurse practitioner program this spring. I wrote her recommendation letter, and I meant every word. She was the first person in that mess who didn't try to manage me, diagnose me, or use me. She just told me the truth. I still have bad nights. Sometimes I walk past my father's office and feel angry that it has new locks and new procedures, because people I loved treated it like a prize. Sometimes I miss the Callum I thought I married. That's the part people don't always get. You can be completely done with someone and still grieve who they pretended to be. I don't forgive him. Maybe someday I'll feel differently, but right now, no. I'm tired of people acting like forgiveness is the rent women have to pay before they're allowed to move on. Forgiveness is personal. Safety is not negotiable. So I'm asking you, if your husband and mother-in-law tried to prove you were unstable so they could take control of what your father left you, would you ever forgive them? Or would you do exactly what I did and let the receipts speak for themselves? Tell me what you would have done, because part of me still wonders if I waited too long. Thank you for listening. If this story made you mad, or if you've ever had someone call you dramatic just because you finally protected yourself, leave a comment. And if you like messy family confessions with receipts, like and subscribe for more stories from her confession room.